Okay, everybody out there in YouTube land, welcome to Roleplayer with 1,000 Faces. So I am Matt Yancik, and every few weeks I try to get some cool creators in here to talk a little bit about their creative process and maybe what goes on behind the scenes. And tonight, for me, but this morning for Federico, I'm pretty excited to have Federico Sohns on, who developed and created and kickstarted and is pretty much doing so much behind the scenes on Nibiru, which was a super cool game that I actually took part in partially funding. And by the way, it's the first Kickstarter I ever got my name into, so thank you so much for that. I'm pretty excited because when I first actually found Nibiru, I was really interested in the way that there seemed to be like storytelling was like a really integral kind of part to the game, and I was really excited to sort of learn what it was going to be about. But we'll get into that a little bit later. But for today, for now, Federico, how are you doing?
Doing great. Just enjoying the nice weather. How about
Yeah,
you?
I'm okay. I'm doing all right. So it's a little bit chilly here. So I don't know if you know this, but I'm actually in the Boston area, and we got like
Mm,
a lot of cold rain, and it just turned to ice.
mm.
And I've actually slipped on the ice twice today, fallen
Jesus.
flat on my ass. But I have to say, this is good luck. I think that the interviews go well when I have bad luck earlier on in the day, and when I have good luck, they go terribly. So I think that this is going to be just fine. So Federico, thank you so much for sparing some of your time to come on the program. Um, I was hoping, even though I know we're all excited to hear about Nibiru and Xanadu and all the other things you might have going on, I want to know a little bit about you first of all, because who are you? Where did you come from? Just suddenly one day, I saw the Kickstarter project and I was like, oh my gosh, who is this person and why is he doing such a cool thing? What? Who are you? Tell us.
I'm basically an Argentinian games designer. I started basically doing this thing, game design, about a few months after I moved to London, about like 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I essentially moved from Argentina to the UK. It's the first time I ever left the country, really. And yeah, I started doing that, just like tackling that project, Nibiru, which I kind of wanted to do. And eventually I started getting more into the industry. I got a job at the industry and making the game. And like now I'm in Japan, but like, yeah, it's been a journey, let's say.
Oh, really? Okay, well, I want to hear about that then. But let's hold on and go with the what prompted you to move to London? Was that with your family or was that you on your own or was that
No, that was me on my own.
wow.
I wanted to be an actor,
Oh, cool.
and I think that creatively, like in Argentina, it's very hard to like sort of like earn a living as an artist.
Mhm.
So even if I ended up doing something else, which is what happened, yeah, I kind of had to move out to be able to live off of it. So yeah, that's basically what motivated me to move.
I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised. So you mentioned you wanted to be an actor. Is that still something kind of that you're thinking about, or have you kind of been like, oh my goodness, I think I found my thing with game design?
No, no, I think it's not, it's certainly not something that I would like to do like professionally. Like I think that like to me nowadays acting is something that is much more related to like just my personality when I'm around people and
Hmm.
when I'm around friends and stuff, but not something that I would do as a job. Yeah.
Wait a minute. So does that mean is that something that factors? What's interesting to me about this, okay, is that when I was in college, I wanted to do film, and I actually wanted to become like a film director. And I moved out to
Mm-hmm.
LA. And everybody, like in the first, like when I was hunting for jobs, like every single day I'd walk into a shop and I'd say, I'm looking for a job here. And they're like, let me guess, you want to be an actor? And I'm like, no, 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 no. I want to be a director, but I also want a job here. So do you find that the acting is something that just sort of came naturally out of your personality, or was that something more closely related to the gaming side of things, like the role play
Oh
part?
no, definitely about my personality. It's just like I love playing characters essentially, and yeah, sort of like stepping outside of my normal, let's say, yeah. But it ended up being like, to me, that like that is my normal, like a part of my normal personality, especially when I'm with friends. That's something that I eventually realized, that that's how it was, and not something that I wanted to like put on some sort of like professional thing and do professionally. But yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of, for me, what happened with me is that it I wasn't so interested in that, but what I ended up doing was, in order to like direct or to maybe supervise at least, you kind of have to have a bigger personality, or at least louder personality. Whether or not you're
Mm-hmm.
successful, that's kind of something different. But I would have to be like calling out to that corner and telling people to do this and that corner to do that, which is eventually what I think when I stumbled into, and I don't know if I mentioned this, but my viewers might know it. I'm a teacher of about 20 years. I've been teaching English, and I feel like all of that background in film direction, maybe a little like smattering of acting, helped me become a better teacher. Do you
Yeah,
think?
totally.
Do you think that it's helped, like your interest in acting and the way that you kind of are conscious of the way you're behaving? Do you think that's made you a better game designer or a better role player?
Oh
Or
yeah, totally. Anything you sort of like nourish yourself with when it comes to the arts will like will make whatever output you do, like artistic output, will make it richer. Like
mm-hmm.
that's for sure. Like yeah, 100%.
So then, when was it that maybe you first discovered your interest in role playing as sort of something that you enjoyed, just as as like the young you, and then as you get older and you realize, I've got to start looking for jobs to do? What were some of the first things that interested you or sparked your interest in role playing?
I think it's an interesting question, because like there was this thing that I was kind of like pondering about like 2 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
about how um for example, like getting into role playing games compared to like other forms of art is super inaccessible. You have to read a book, you have to sort of like be in the thing. If you're a narrator, you have to sort of like learn how to tell stories, and you have to
Yeah.
get people together, etc. But at the same time, there's this weird thing where and with music, etc., games, movies, you can just press a button and you're there. But on the other hand, there's this weird like dichotomy where actually doing the work, like designing a game, is so much easier than sitting down and doing music production, or making a film, or something like that. Like people design games that are like 1 page long, and they
Mm-hmm.
just sit down, they type something down, and they do it. And I think it was how accessible it was to get creative and to create things that got me into designing games. Because I could say that I started 6 years ago when I started working on Nibiru, but really the first time I ever played role playing games, which I was like 15, I was like at home with a friend, and we had like the PDF for like Warhammer First Edition. Um, we didn't really understood a lot of the rules,
Mm-hmm.
so we started making stuff up, and how we were like brothers, and because we had like a very close bond, if something happened to the other, like the other got like bonuses to try and push the story forward, or to surpass whatever obstacle there was. And that was like such an intuitive and easy active design, because it was there, like it was text, you could see the mechanics and you could just change them. So because of that, because of how accessible it was, I think like I leaned into it heavily from very early on. So yeah.
What was your first? So was Warhammer your first game, or was there something before
Yeah.
Warhammer? Oh wow,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so funny because when I think about my first game, the first time I ever played role playing games was probably when I was 12 or 13 with my sister. I played the Marvel superheroes role playing game, and kind of like just like you described. I don't think I really understood the rules at all because like it had like 2 or 3 different books, and actually at 11 or 12 I wasn't the reader that I am now. And so for me to sort of sit down and parse out how the rules worked and all of that it would have been really, really difficult. And so I just made stuff up. And I didn't even know at that point that there was such a thing as a game master. I kind of just thought that we played it like a board game. So it's kind of interesting that you would say something like that, because it sounds very much like almost like what I went through myself. So then let me ask you this. What was the point then where you sort of said, well, gee, like I can actually design stuff to fit in these games that I'm playing, say for Warhammer or for things like that? Was there a moment where you're like, oh, I'm going to make some stuff up for my friends to use, or I'm going to try and make something to sell to someone? Or
I mean, I had tried my hand maybe. Though I always felt like fulfilled, I guess, with the games I played, and until I started working on Nibiru. The only instance in which I designed something, and it wasn't really a game. It was sort of like a proposal to use games in the classroom for my previous high school. I had like written like a document and like documentation about like how you could use like role-playing games to maybe like set up like a historic scene and think about like, I don't know, ancient history or something like that. Uh, um, but outside of that, I didn't really work or saw like RPGs as work or something that I could develop professionally until I started with Nibiru. Yeah.
that's really interesting, though. So in high school, you were thinking about a document to help you use role-playing games in the classroom? Is that correct?
Yeah, that was like
Wow.
right in the last year of high school or after the last years of high school, because at the time um I had been in a sort of like philosophy essay writing competition, and I did very well, so I ended up like sort of being like an assistant to a teacher during the last year. And because of that, because I was like there with the teacher, etc., I had this opportunity to present that document.
Wow.
But yeah.
That's actually really cool. I feel like really far behind, because it's funny that you would design something like that while you were in high school. So me, having been teaching English for 20 years, I didn't strike upon the idea of using RPGs until maybe 7 or 8 years ago. So I just feel tremendously behind right now. I just feel like I feel lapped basically by someone else. But
Don't worry, there's probably like now like a 13-year-old that's doing the same
yeah,
thing, and I should feel left, right? It's always
right.
like that.
Well, yes, exactly, right? Like, it's so funny because, like, the computers and stuff that I grew up with, like, every once in a while I'll find, like, a fan page or something, and the stuff that I had was so impenetrable to me when I was, like, 17 or 18. Like, 10-year-old kids are taking apart and just sort of, like, putting back together, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting old. I'm so old.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, avoiding the idea that I'm getting old and trying to stay here and YouTube and with the interview, Nibiru was your first. I'm just kind of impressed by this as well. You're saying that's the first attempt you made at designing a game. Is that
Yeah.
basically? Wow, you sit down, because for those of you that haven't checked it out, and I really recommend that you do so. I want everyone to understand I don't get any money for this, though you can always send me some if you want. I don't get any money for this. I chose to interview Federico based on like what I have in my collection. I'm like looking through here and I'm like, who are the people that I want to talk to? Um, Nibiru, to me, I mean, this is a really coolly designed game. And as an English teacher in particular, it really struck me that you would sort of branch, now that you say this, that you would sort of branch out on your own and you're going with essentially, I mean, you've got some base mechanics and things like that, but like your memo system and all of that. Weren't you like super nervous, like just sort of making up something new like that? Or were you just like, I'm going to do it?
I mean, but it's not really new. I mean, like there's people that have done like the memory thing. Maybe it's maybe yeah that there's nothing exactly quite like it. I don't know. Maybe there is, but um, no, I wasn't scared. Like the big thing actually that gave me a lot of confidence during the whole process is that I really believed like 100% in the system, in sort of like the memo system, and that it was a good baseline. A lot of the times actually, if I doubted about my writing, if I doubted about like my art directing or pretty much anything, I would actually rely on the fact that I thought the system was solid to put me through. So yeah.
Okay, that's maybe more confidence than I would have sitting down to write out my my first game, but then again, you're the fellow that came up with using RPGs in the classroom in high school anyway, so that's actually a pretty cool thing. So then tell me, do you think you would have, like, if you were developing an RPG or working on like the idea of using them in the classroom, do you think you might have been a teacher, or had you not gotten into gaming, or maybe the acting bug hadn't followed you?
It
Is it?
certainly would have been something that I could have tried, but to be honest, I don't think it would be the right place for me. Given like the sort of like work that I do, I think of course like to be a teacher, like you have to be creative. It's or at least it's like a big boon to be creative, but it's a different kind of creative output, and there's a different intent in mind. Um, I mean, it's like because that's the thing. Like being a teacher is such a selfless act in many regards, and in my opinion, it's like doing what I do is kind of the opposite. Is the more selfish I guess I'm allowed to feel, the better it is what I work with. Like I try to listen to myself and what I want to express rather than what the people that are going to read it want to see. Uh, so yeah.
Yeah, I would looking at the book that you designed, it's so rich with like world building and there's so much going on, and it doesn't really, I guess it doesn't really surprise me. So you feel it's a selfish act in a way to be coming up with with all of this stuff and indulging maybe your, I guess you're kind of right. That does make some sense to me, right? Because if an artist is thinking about like how to please other people or how to please like, you know, then they're actually not really, in some ways I feel that art is kind of when it's truly someone's expression of their inner selves, and then other people find truth maybe in that, like it's more of a secret sort of truth, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. That's actually a really good point. I'd never really thought about that. So
Mm-hmm.
let me ask you then, way back when you were younger and you were playing those Warhammer games and you were at school, did you consider yourself to be more of a player or more of a game master? And how do you feel like the differences were when you were running versus when you were playing in them? How did you feel about that?
I was almost always running games more than playing, and I always felt more like at home with running games because at the end of the day, it meant that I had more agency on the part of the creative process that was more uh, in my lane, which was world building. World building is my top thing, is what I enjoy the most out of the whole creative process, and that might already if I'd had the insight, that probably would have told me, okay, yeah, maybe you're not destined to be an actor
Mm-hmm.
because you don't
Mm-hmm.
play that much. Like you're more of like a narrator.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, definitely GMing was the thing for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Again, that kind of goes with what I suspected from reading the book and from taking a look at what you
Mhm.
created. And that's funny. How do you feel when sometimes when I'm game mastering, now that you mention this is so interesting that you say it's selfish, because now it makes me kind of call into question what I'm doing when I'm game master. And a lot of times I often feel a little bit more like I'm probably having more fun or enjoying myself maybe more than I would as a player, and I feel in a way like I'm almost stealing. It's hard for me to express, and I almost feel like I'm revealing something horrible. But I feel in a way like I'm stealing something from my players because I'm the one secretly getting a lot of fun, I guess, out of it. I don't know.
Mm. Yeah, I think no, it just depends on what everyone wants to play. Like a lot of people feel much more at ease with being a player, and it's true that for some people, even if they might in other instances enjoy game mastering
Mm-hmm.
more than playing, there's also a problem with responsibility. You have much more responsibility when you're being a games master, and even if you might enjoy game mastering more than being a player, maybe you don't want to take that responsibility. You want to, be able to step back and just see how other people do and stuff like that. So I think there's a balance to strike. Different games do different things.
Yeah.
Like more games put more world building agency on the players. Some put that less on them. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that I would actually agree with that. What's funny though is that I think sometimes as a teacher, when I am in other teachers' classrooms, I feel like this is going to sound weird, but I feel like I make a better student than the average student because I feel like I know what I would look for, say, in a student. And so I try to behave and respond in that particular way. So I wonder if, as a game master, do you feel um, it gives you insights into, I know this is going to sound weird, but maybe being a better player?
Um, Yeah, I mean, if you're a games master, of course that there are some things that you want players to at least consider, like the classical stuff that everyone knows, like the not splitting the party, not if there's someone that's maybe having a hard time, like going forward and making a statement or playing their character, maybe helping them out, etc. Like you get some insight into that. um but yeah, I think it does, like doing every part of the whole thing, like being a player, being a games master, it will help you with both roles, let's say.
Mm.
um,
Do you feel that running RPGs and playing in RPGs has maybe affected you in your everyday life, like outside of, say, game design and outside of do you feel that it's like enhanced or helped you with other skills or abilities? Now I feel like I'm talking in RPG terms now, but in real
Not
life,
really.
no.
No, not really. I it's funny. I think like because I've been asked this question before, and and
Mm-hmm.
and generally with regards to that, with regards to like influences and stuff like that,
Yeah.
not really. Like I think it's been fun, but I haven't really been like super influenced by any particular game. I might have, sure, I've been influenced, and I've grown like friendships based on it, and that's, I think, that the most important part. But it's always sort of like accessory to the actual experience, or the contrary, the experience is accessory to the act of like hanging out with friends and stuff like that. At least personally, I know like people have like super big stories about it, like how they've been able to like overcome like social anxieties and
Right.
stuff with role playing games. But not in my case.
No, that's totally fine. Because it sounds like to me, if you are describing yourself as having thought that you would become an actor, to me, someone that this is not always true, and it's dangerous to make assumptions, but to me, a person that sort of starts out from a position or from like a foundation of wanting to become an actor, or do something theatrical or do something expressive is already a person who is, while someone is new at expressing themselves, they are interested in it and they're looking for and they are seeking out opportunities with which to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, like the idea that what you may, and I don't know, you can totally correct me if I'm wrong, but when I sometimes hear people that are describe the things that you just described, and then I also know that they're a creator, in a way, while you say that what you're doing might be selfish, or I guess you're not saying it's selfish. You're saying that maybe the indulgence of it is a joy that is not maybe necessarily shared by people that
It's
experience
very
it.
intimate.
It's right, because it's like one-on-one. Like when you're sitting alone with your manuscript and you're going through it, you're not thinking about what anyone else is. You're thinking about how
Mm-hmm.
to make yourself happy. But in the end, when you publish this, you are creating a situation or a scenario. Like anyone can pick this up, and while you're kind of right, you're saying like, well, it's tough to access, right? Because you have to go in there and you have to open the book and look at the pages and think about
Mm-hmm.
it. I think if the creator has kind of done their job, they're creating like a great situation or scenario for people to express themselves in different
Oh yeah, totally.
ways, shapes,
Yeah,
and forms.
and that's definitely something that like at some point in the creative process, it's it's something that like it comes into like you think about it like editing, proofreading. It's the same as if like I can create like an amazing like piece of music, but then if like the end file is, I don't know, like 70 megabytes, I have to add some compression or something like
Right.
that so that people can actually download it or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to make it accessible.
Yeah.
You have to make it accessible. And I mean, I know we're
Mhm.
getting into like very simple kind of terms here, but like the whole idea of the way that you set the, when you sit down, you have to think about, well, how is it I'm designing a book that is going to be read by players, read by game masters, but it
Mhm.
also has to be kind of like it has to work for both of them at the same time. Like a game master has to be able to pick it up and go relatively quickly through it and know this, this, and the other thing. And then the
Mhm.
player has to be able to sort of go through it and know this, this, and the other thing. Um, well, kind of in that vein, when you're actually setting out to run a game yourself, how do you? Well, can I ask? Like, are you regularly playing these days, or are you kind of
Nope.
busy? I was thinking that it's been tough. Is it? Um,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, certainly. It's been
is
tough.
it is it because of the move, or is it because of COVID going on, or is it kind of a combination, or are you just super busy because I know you're working on the Xanadu
Mm.
Kickstarter? Um,
It's a bunch of different things. I think it goes beyond that. Like generally, I don't usually like playing like online, and I
right,
also don't generally like playing live with people that I don't know. So I do rely on like getting together with friends. I have done like online here and there, but always with like friends.
right.
So to me, it's like a very personal thing that I just don't hop onto a game just like that and run or play. So yeah, it's even more than about the current situation. Yeah.
Right. So are you itching to find people to play with now, or is it kind of okay for you at the moment because you do have other things going on?
Uh, no, I think it's kind of okay. I'm really not itching, particularly not itching to run, because like running a game now would be a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't have the same sort of pull that a lot of people in the community have, I think, to play. I think also like designing games kind of gives you a different sort of like lens to playing and stuff like that, that might take a bit of the magic away.
Yeah, right. You know how the sausage is made, so then you kind of see.
Mm-hmm.
And I've kind of wondered about this too. Like I remember reading interviews with writers who often say, if you're a struggling writer in the beginning, go find a job, a day job where you just use your hands all day and you don't have to use your brain, because then you can kind of come home and you can use your brain for your writing and you don't burn yourself out. I guess you kind of hinted at this just now, but is it tough? Like, I imagine if you're designing, it's kind of quasi 9 to 5. You kind of sit down and you maybe have to keep yourself on a schedule, and then when you stack on top of that, just playing a fun game with friends, does it make it a little bit tougher to have fun with that game, or vice versa, maybe?
I think there's some things that it depends entirely on the sort of like creative endeavor that I sit down to make. There's stuff like, for example, like writing to me takes a lot of energy and a lot of time for very little input. I write very little generally. Like I write every day, but it's still not much. Like for me, like 1,000 words in a day is a lot. Which for some writers, like they just blast through that sort of thing. And I can't do it for a long time. Whereas, for example, if it's drawing and illustrating, I can do it like pretty much every day for like hours on end. And if it's about like music production, it's something that I do once every month or something like that. I have to be like right in the right mood. So it depends. And playing role-playing games, I think it's easy, but running them, yeah, that's much more demanding for me creatively.
How do you go about, like, then if you're going to start a game, do you do like a do you sit down with your players and you say, hey, I was thinking about running this, do you want to run do you want to play in it, or do you sort of sit down and do a session 0 and really go through in detail exactly what you're going to do, or is it sometimes a combination of both? Or do you sometimes just say, hey, let's play Friday?
No, it's more like the first, and this like weird sort of like passive aggressive game of like sort of like confabulating and trying to see who's actually going to run, and hoping it's not you.
Really? Wait.
At least not now, because now I want to play more than run.
Right.
But yeah.
Right. So it's like a little game of chicken where you're like, so we all want to play such and such game. This sounds great. And then you just sort of awkwardly wait for someone else to sort of step up and say, hey, I'm going to run it.
Yeah.
That's not bad. I think that's a healthy thing. I really do. I think that's probably a normal, healthy thing. Like there are, I think, my problem is that a lot of times I ended up being the guy that ran, and I've been running for like 35 something years. I've been teaching for 20 years. So if I have any skill, it's not because I'm born talented. It's not because I'm good. It's only because I have so much time doing it. I can sort of create the illusion that I know what I'm doing, and everybody feels kind of comfortable under that, under whatever I'm doing. And so it's tough sometimes to find other people that are willing to step up and allow me to sort of step back and just be myself. Or I should say be my character in that particular case. So I think I understand what you're saying there. Is there a game that you are thinking about playing now? Or is there something, are you kind of like, oh, I wish somebody would come up to me and say, let's play, let me run for you, such and such?
Oh, if I could play something, I would probably love to play either Dialect, which is my favorite game,
Oh, cool.
um, or maybe try to play either Nibiru or Zephyr, which is like another game that I'm designing. Yeah.
You would allow someone else to run Nibiru and you would feel like, okay, I can step
Oh
back
yeah, I
from
don't
it.
care.
Oh, cool. I think that's
Yeah, I
really
don't
good.
care at all.
But I mean, think that that's really good, right? Because that goes with the idea. If you're going to go through all the trouble of creating something like this, and then you send it out there, and then thousands of people pick it up, and they all start playing it, no one's going to be playing it, the exact way maybe that the creator wants them to play it. So I think in a way, I mean,
Yeah, and they shouldn't.
exactly, right? So I'm thinking it's not really the selfish act of the creation is for a selfless kind of purpose, and that is to maybe help enable like people out there maybe to piggyback on the imagination of the creator and then to sort of run with it in a way, and then with the creator's blessing and with their hands off of it, just sort of do their thing.
Yeah, totally.
So you mentioned drawing and music. The drawing I had kind of known about. The music I didn't know about. I was just sort of wondering, like, when I look at this game, I can see that your fingerprints are all over it. Your name is in like half the credits. Was You are a man of many talents, and you have many different sort of things here. How do they all sort of work together to help you be you, or to help you stay sane, or to help you enjoy life?
I mean, they all keep me sane, for sure. At least experiencing some of that, like the art form, let's say, in which I spend more time in, like as like audience, is music, definitely. That's like my biggest influence. And then when it comes to actually doing stuff and that sort of like bringing some balance to my life or whatever, that is generally world building as a big thing, backed up by like illustration, and then writing. But yeah, that's basically how it is.
So that's kind of like the current order of interest, or order of maybe
Yeah.
passion at the moment. Because I know that you have been putting out a lot of you seem to be doing a lot of experimentation, like with drawing and work right now. Is there something in particular you're working on, or you're trying to develop? It could be either like a project specifically, or maybe a particular kind of skill or something that you're trying to work on for yourself.
Yeah, I'm basically kind of working half and half now, because for Xanadu, the current expansion of Nibiru is mostly writing work that I'm doing, and for the next project that's coming, Zephyr, there is a bit of writing, but mostly is what I'm doing on my free time, let's say, which is like by illustrating. And for that in particular, I find it like super liberating, because I'm kind of working within certain constraints. The fact that like every picture I make is supposed to be a spread illustration for the book, and that the composition has to work in a certain way so that there's always text, but that the place where the text goes is integrated into the composition, and it's a part of it, etc. So it's interesting, because it's challenging on the one hand, but on the other hand, illustrating brings me a lot of peace, so I can just do it whenever and it works. So yeah, that's basically the current thing.
So the current illustrations then, do you feel that, are you working them specifically towards the project, or is there something, is there anything on the outside? Like, do you feel now that you're doing illustrations for the project, are you like, oh my goodness, I'm itching to do something where I don't have to work on the project and just go wild and crazy with something else? Or
No, because like that's the thing. Like I see I see my creative output as like a necessity. I think that part of like being an artist or whatever is that you do it because you need to do it. It's not a thing that you go into and you just, it's my hobby and I do it like sometimes. I need to express some things. There are some things in your mind that come to you, I don't know, when you're taking a shower or going out for a bike or whatever, that you just need to put on paper, and you need to express themselves, uh, those things. So it's liberating. I yeah, that's basically how it feels.
Do you feel in a way like you've kind of fallen into this then? And I know I keep kind of harping on it, but I keep thinking about you maybe going to London and thinking about acting. And now here you are in Japan and you're working on RPG design. Do you feel like you're just sort of you're chasing the things and you're finding out and sort of discovering things that maybe about yourself that you didn't know before, and maybe you're just sort of following after those things? Or had these always been kind of
Yeah,
things in your head?
um, I mean, if it's on a project basis, I had Nibiru for like Nibiru sort of like marinated for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's the same with Zephyr. Like Zephyr, it's been on my head for like the past 2 years. But it is true that to realize what I wanted with Zephyr, I had to advance certain skills, specifically illustration. And only just now I feel happy with like the stuff that I'm drawing. I feel like I'm drawing the things that I had in my head and I can actually put them on paper.
Cool.
So that's very fulfilling.
Yeah.
And it means that now there's like this need of actually putting like and writing and so like illustrating all those ideas. So yeah, that's kind of the thing.
No, I think that's really cool. It sounds like it's just been a natural progression from one to the next to the next. It's kind of like you can't have the next one without the prior one, and you're sort of building with each one.
Yeah, totally.
So can I kind of wanted to rewind a little bit, and because I feel like I skipped over something I'd kind of been curious about. Memory, the idea of lost memories in Nibiru is just a huge thing. What was it about lost memories? What was it about this idea of like going back to examine and creating as you kind of progress through the game? What was so so interesting to you about that?
I think at the beginning, because that's one of those things, like when at the beginning you don't really know much about your own ideas. Like your ideas is something that you continue to find out stuff about even later in life and stuff like that. At the beginning, it was mainly just a sort of like vehicle to sort of like do some creative writing and to help players do creative writing. Like these are like little bits of like digestible background lore that they can just write, and they immediately have an effect on how their planes interact with the world, etc. That was sort of like the thing at the moment. But as time went on, of course, and especially as I saw people playing the game and going back and forth with the theme of memory, like yeah, of course it's an important part of like who I am. Like this idea that, like, for example, there's stuff about like my life in Argentina that are memories that now feel like a completely different world. It feels like a completely different lifetime, and it's most likely that like 4 years from now, my life in London would have feel like the same way. And it's sort of like an abyss that's kind of not comparable, but sort of in the same vein as to what the players experience in Nibiru, this thing about like having a previous life and just waking up in a space station, remembering all that stuff. So a lot of like, yeah, the personal experience goes into it, and even if subconsciously I knew it, like consciously at the time I wasn't aware of a lot of the stuff that I expressed. But that speaks, of course, about the necessity of expressing this stuff. Maybe I'm not conscious and I'm not being able to spell it out, but it's coming through the game, and that means something.
Yeah, and I think it also ties into the idea of this game being, a player and or a group of people getting together, and like I think whether we know it or not, we pick characters and we shape our characters for certain reasons that maybe sometimes we're not even aware of.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we could all I think I could probably look back at all of the characters that I played in my life, and I'll bet there are a lot of commonalities that I might not have focused on at the time
Mm-hmm.
because I was just like, oh, this character seems cool, and I think I'm going to make this in their background and that in their background, and maybe I'm going to make that up. And I think the idea of as you play along in the game, you're kind of like writing your own history. You're creating your own
Mm-hmm.
history in the same way that maybe as I walk around in real life, I pick something up and I think, oh, I remember when my father gave this to me or whatever. And then
Mm-hmm.
it has more significance to it in a way. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things, and again, I'm not being paid to say this, but one of the things I do like about the game, and I know there are games with similar kinds of ideas, but I feel like there's a real kind of mystery to your game
Mm-hmm.
that's a little bit different, and there's a kind of like a poetry to it in a way as well. But it's a to me it's a little bit of there's this sort of gentle kind of theme to it of sort of uncovering and discovering these things, and
Mm-hmm.
that is something that I find particularly refreshing, even though I played Warhammer like you, and I love swinging I love swinging a battle axe and all of that in
Mm-hmm.
imagination. But I also like the idea of this theme of discovery. Like there's that cool painting in there of a man that's like swinging, I think, a pipe or
Yeah.
something. But then in the background, he's also a baseball player, as if like
Mm-hmm.
he's sort of harkening back to, skills he
Yeah.
had
Mm-hmm.
before. And I think that's like an important and kind of
Mm-hmm.
vital part of the game. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a soliloquy here, and
No, no, it's great to hear that.
it's
It's
not
always
the
great.
well, yeah, that's true. I forget you're the guy that created it, so I think that you would probably like to hear my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
I meant to ask, just speaking because I'm kind of speaking a little bit personal now and from the heart. So I noticed that you mentioned a mental health and physics advisors for
Mm-hmm.
both. Now, can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, for how did you utilize them?
I mean, they both kind of serve different purposes, I guess. Like, I think having a mental health advisor, because I was tackling issues about mental health, and I'm not a professional. I
Mm-hmm.
think it was necessary to make sure I'm not hurting people by writing
Yeah.
what I'm writing. To the best of my capabilities, I guess.
Yeah.
But it was kind of weird because I think that like it was one of those situations with the mental health thing that I felt like um even if I didn't do like a perfect job, or like a lot of the people that were looking at the same things that I was looking at wouldn't be doing like a perfect job of representing some of this stuff. Um, there was sort of like an agreement in the community that we were sort of like riffing on this really decadent and kind of yeah, just antique idea of the perception of mental health,
Yeah.
and the sort of like romanticizing of
Mm-hmm.
it, and the whole idea of, yeah, it's a downward spiral, and you go loco, and this is
Right.
what happens. And
Right.
um so I kind of wanted to like push it a bit, being like, okay, this is a bit more complex, and
Yeah.
it's kind of serious, and if you don't want to tackle it, you can just do this, etc. And I had basically the mental health advisor to check through that. um, but with the science stuff, that was more to help my sort of like world building effort and making certain parts of the setting more believable. I think that of course, like there's a lot of people that appreciate the thought of putting some thought to like the science and how stuff works. Um, but it wasn't necessarily for that, but to like boost immersion for like a lot of those people. Even if then like there's a chunk of the setting that goes in like a super wild and sort of like more fantasy-esque side. The fact that at the same time it's very, there's parts that are very rooted in like a certain logic or like scientific sort of like thing. It's yeah, I think it was valuable. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I think.
I believe 100%. Like as actually as like I said, as a teacher of 20 years, one thing that recent studies have basically shown is that role play in the classroom, and I'm not necessarily talking about like, you know, D&D, Dungeons and Dragons type RPG role play, but I just mean the role play in the classroom that you do with children, like 4th, 5th, 6th graders, all the way up through, heck, I've done it with 12th graders. Negative, it's very important the way that you do it, and that is to be to role play in a way that is accurate and truthful. There's a lot to being like, I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but there are some times when in classrooms, at least here in the United States, teachers will role play out situations where there are like negative people and there are positive people. And the thinking was, okay, if we have someone run and be the negative person and one person being the positive person, this is going to teach, and then we switch, this is going to teach both sides a little bit about what it feels like to be on both. But studies have actually shown that the more negative aspects of it rub off in the wrong ways on the children, and it's really better to role play the more positive aspects and the more accurate things as opposed to inaccurate. So the idea that you would take the time, the physics advisor is something that impresses me because I don't think I've ever seen that in a role-playing game. But what more impresses me is the mental health advisor, because I think that that's really important in games. And I think there's something to the fact, like if you're going to play something, it should be done, I believe, in an accurate and respectable sort of way. And it should be at least presented in the rules and the guidebook in a way. And then I guess it's up to the players, whatever they're going to do with it. It's kind of out of your hands at that point. But I really... I don't have a question to this. I just wanted to say I think that's it's a good thing to do. Like the teacher in me really likes that very much. So with that then in mind, I was just sort of wondering, what do you think about your future maybe with RPGs? I know that you have the Kickstarter going on now, and then you mentioned you have something coming up even after that. Can you tell us a little bit about that for yourself?
Yeah, sure.
As much as you want.
Yeah, cool. It's basically a game called Zephyr, and it's like Nibiru. It's also working on basically two thematic axes that are sort of like identity and feelings. So now it's not identity and memory, but it's identity and feelings. And sort of like also riffing on some ideas on anthropology about debt and obligation.
Cool.
So and the cool thing is that like among the many cool things it has is that like I'm basically illustrating it front to back. It's going to be like front to back, fully illustrated with this like idea of like the composition of the spreads, also like working along with the text. And it's, I think the world building is gonna get really weird because it's gonna be a fantasy game. And it's kind of playing a lot with it's basically about like these groups of people called the Windfolk that are living in like a wandering landmass, sort of like a continent that's living and breathing and sort of like wanders.
Cool.
And there's a whole thing about like the metaphysics of feelings. So the idea that feelings like anger, sorrow, I don't know, jealousy, hope, they have like an actual sort of like metaphysical manifestation, and they work as you would see like dynamic fluid dynamics, like for
Oh,
example
wow.
the solid, the liquid, and the gas. So you could see like rivers made of like pure sorrow, or mountains built of like crystallized rage, or
Mhm.
stuff like that. So there's a lot of like really cool sort of like world building based on the metaphysics of feelings and color theory. Because that's something that I'm playing with, like the idea that this continent that's moving, the landmass is called Ophoi, and basically has its own feelings that kind of like push it to like move forward. These are feelings that are known to the windfall, to the players, which come in four colors: the CYMK, the cyan,
Oh,
yellow,
cool.
magenta, and black.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the idea is that from those base feelings that are unknown, the common feelings that we as players know are actually formed. So you combine like this color and this, and you form the color of rage or the color of sorrows,
Oh,
etc.
wow.
So it has a lot of world building that the societies of the wind folk sort of like try to empathize with this being that they don't know how it feels, like the continent, the landmass, and how this volatility and the way the feelings sort of like change affects the way they live on their daily life, the way they gain sustenance, the way they interact with the world and the societies that they have. I think it's really interesting.
It
It's going to be super
sounds,
fun.
yeah, it sounds really cool. So this has been kind of gestating in your head for a few years now, you said?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
do you think that there's an initial spark that made you start thinking, or was it some little thing that just sort of gathered lint and it started getting bigger and bigger?
I yeah, it kind of started like very small with the idea that I wanted to do something with like feelings and
Mm-hmm.
identity. Um because like of a very simple thought, I think that like whatever you consider part of your identity, whether it is opinions, whether it is people in your life, it's always stuff that you feel something about,
Uh-huh.
whether it is something that
Yeah.
you hate, whether it is something that you love. um, Generally the stuff that is strictly not part of who you are or part of your daily thought process is stuff that you either don't know or are completely apathetic to. So I wanted to like explore that sort of connection, of how these concepts and ideas like become part of you because of your feelings towards them. So that's where like the idea of identity and feeling came about.
Mm,
Sort of like also making a parallel with the idea of identity based on memory from Nibiru.
right.
Um, so yeah.
Do you think and I don't I our time is about up, but I wanted there's one more question this kind of reminded me of. What do you think role playing games maybe could do for the world? Like, do you think they serve some sort of function, or are they just simply about fun, or do they teach us something, or do you think they can do something for us that other forms of entertainment or other form like a book can't do or a movie can't do, or is there something RPGs can do
Mm.
for us?
I think yes. It's a complex question because RPGs have a lot of potential. I think that most designers will tell you that the sort of like revelation they had upon playing first time like a role playing game
Mm-hmm.
is a revelation of potential. It's the potential of being like, wow, this could be anything. You could like
Right.
role play with like little stones and do like weird sort of like collective like
Yeah.
20 people group exercises in storytelling. But in practice, like we're all rolling like the same polyhedral dice
Mm-hmm.
and killing monsters in a dungeon. um, so there's a big gap, I think, between the mainstream in the role-playing game
Yeah.
industry
Yeah.
and the true potential of the art form, which is
Yeah.
such a young art form.
Mm-hmm.
um, so is there potential? Yes. It's far from being fully realized, I think. And the big problem that role-playing games as a way of changing the world or making a positive impact have is that the big difference they have with a lot of other media is that they're super interpretative. So if you want to make a statement, it's something that's way harder, and it has to be done in a much more subtle way. You're not handing a painting or like a statement written in a page. You're handing them a pencil or a pen and hoping that they write what you want them to write.
Right. Or hoping that they sort of interpret your rule set in a way that, that's actually a really good point. Like I've kind of thought about it a lot myself, and I really think that's actually something I hadn't thought about. Is in a way you're sort of crossing your fingers, I guess, that they take it, or at least they use it or explore with it in ways you hope. Maybe you don't want them to go down certain paths, but you hope that they'll use it to explore the right areas or whatever. But
yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, Federico, thank you very much. I want to thank you so much. A lot of people don't know this, but I simply just email people. I just email my creators from like from my stack of books on my shelf, and they say yes or they don't. And Federico said yes. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I have put, for those of you watching, I put links to Xanadu, to the Kickstarter, in the description below, and to, of course, Federico's company, and to more information on Nibiru, so that you can check it out. I really urge you to give it a look. We were not coordinating here on this, but when he mentioned the fact that there's a little bit of an obstacle to games, and that I think most people think that role-playing begins with dungeons and ends with dragons. I think that that's kind of like a little bit of something we have to overcome. There's so many other wonderful things as an English teacher and as a game master of years that I think RPGs can be used for, and I think starting with Nibiru is a really good spot for exploring the alternatives to storytelling and the potential of games that Federico was talking about. So once again, Federico, thank you so much. I do appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
and to all of you at home, thank you for watching.